Somewhere in your office right now, there is a lease copier. And buried inside that machine is a hidden hard drive holding a perfect high-resolution image of literally every single medical record, driver's license, and insurance form you've scanned for, the past 3 years.
Yep, every single one.
Right. And when you return that copier next month, who gets that data?
Yeah.
We often think about throwing something away as the most mindless act in the world. You finish with a piece of paper, you toss it in a bin, and poof, it's out of your life.
If only it were that simple.
Exactly. But in the healthcare sector, that simple act of disposal transforms into a surprisingly high-stakes, multi-million-dollar regulatory minefield. Welcome to this deep dive, where we are exploring the intense, highly regulated world of medical document destruction.
It really is a hidden ecosystem. The afterlife of our information, we focus so much on securing data while we are using it, like building firewalls, setting up complex passwords.
Two-factor authentication, all of that.
Right, all of that. But then we completely neglect the vulnerabilities that open up the second we decide we no longer need that data.
And to guide us through this vulnerability gap, we are looking at some incredibly detailed sources today. We have a video transcript and a really comprehensive article from Neighborhood Parcel and mydocumentshredding.com.
Yeah, they're a specialized compliance and shredding service operating out of Tewksbury, Massachusetts.
Right, and our mission today is to uncover exactly why simply throwing away an old patient chart or returning that office copier carries such massive danger. And how the heavy machinery of HIPAA-Compliant basically dictates the final moments of your personal data. So, okay, let's unpack this. Before we examine the physics of how data is destroyed, we have to look at the legal net that forces practices to destroy it in such a specific way.
The foundational stuff.
Yeah, particularly the trap of the business associate clause. IPA has been around for a while now.
Oh, yeah. Since 1996. Signed by Bill Clinton. And back then, the goal was super practical, standardizing electronic data, making insurance portable, reducing fraud. But obviously, as electronic records exploded, the laws had to evolve.
Right. We got the privacy rule in 2003 for protected health information, or PHI, and then the security rule in 2005 for electronic PHI.
Exactly. And those regulations place strict mandates on what they call covered entities.
Which is pretty much anyone billing electronically, right?
Yeah, virtually any practice, from a massive hospital network all the way down to your local optometrist. But the complexity really arises when those covered entities need to outsource their disposal.
Because they can't just burn it in the parking lot.
Right, no bonfires allowed. The law dictates that a third-party shredding company or a data destruction vendor is legally classified as a business associate. They are handling that PHI on behalf of the practice.
Okay.
Therefore, they absolutely must operate under a formalized business associate agreement or a BAA.
And that agreement fundamentally changes the relationship, doesn't it? It goes from a simple vendor transaction to a massive transfer of liability. It's like if a practice hires a shredding company without a rigorous BAA, it is the equivalent of hiring a random person off the street to guard a bank vault.
That is exactly what it is. You are handing over the most sensitive assets you possess.
Right. And if that unvetted vendor, say, leaves bags of documents unsecured on a loading dock, or lets paper blow down the highway during transport, the medical practice retains all of the regulatory exposure. The liability just bounces right back to the doctor's office.
What's fascinating here is how many healthcare administrators view IPA as background noise, especially when dealing with physical waste.
Background noise. Really?
Yeah, compliance becomes institutionalized to the point of numbness. They just get used to it. So administrators start treating the hiring of a document destruction company as a routine procurement decision. A race to the bottom to find the absolute cheapest vendor to haul away the paper.
I see. Treating it like regular trash removal.
Exactly. They fail to treat it as a strict compliance decision. Procurement focuses on minimizing cost, but compliance must focus on managing risk. When you treat data destruction as simple trash removal, you step blindly into the crosshairs of federal regulators.
Which means writing a strict law is one thing, but the physics of actually executing that destruction is where this system frequently breaks down. Because the legal standard dictated by the regulations is that the data must be rendered unreadable, indecipherable, and not able to be reconstructed.
That last part is key.
Right, the operative phrase being not able to be reconstructed. That drastically alters what qualifies as proper disposal. Let's look at physical paper first. We often see practices mistakenly relying on those commercial script cut shredders.
Oh, the ones you just grab at a local office supply store.
Exactly. And they're completely unaware that those long ribbons fail the regulatory standard.
They fail spectacularly. Security researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that those long, uniform ribbons can be scanned and fed into modern optical reconstruction software.
Wait, software that just puts the shreds back together?
Yeah. The software analyzes the microscopic tear patterns, the ink bleed at the edges of the cuts, even the font kerning, and it automatically reassembles the documents like a digital jigsaw puzzle.
That is terrifying. So how do you actually stop that?
Well, to satisfy the mandate that data cannot be reconstructed, practices are required to use industrial crosscut or microcut shredding. These machines use opposing cylinders to reduce paper to basically confetti-sized particles.
Just totally destroying the structural integrity of the paper grain itself.
Precisely, making optical reassembly mathematically impossible.
And the scope of what must undergo that microcut process is much broader than people realize, I think. It is not just comprehensive medical histories.
Not at all.
It's a simple daily sign-in sheet at the front desk, an outdated appointment schedule, a billing statement, even a discarded hospital wristband. All of those items contain identifying markers tied to health or treatment.
Yeah, they are officially protected health information and require maximum security destruction. You cannot just casually drop a patient wristband into a break room recycling bin.
Right. But the physical paper requirements are just one side of it. The digital side presents an entirely different class of physics.
Oh, definitely. With electronic PHI, dragging a file to the recycling bin on your desktop and clicking empty, that does not remove the data.
It just hides it, essentially.
Pretty much. It simply deletes the file pointer. You know, the invisible map the operating system uses to locate the data on the drive. The actual zeros and ones remain perfectly intact on the disk until they are overwritten by new information.
Meaning, data recovery software can easily bypass the missing pointers and just read the residual data directly from the drives.
Exactly.
But to meet the standard of being indecipherable, the physical storage architecture basically has to be attacked. For traditional magnetic hard drives or magnetic backup tapes, acceptable destruction involves degaussing.
Right, the giant magnet approach.
Yeah, you expose the drive to a massive, concentrated magnetic field that fundamentally randomizes the magnetic domains on the platters.
Yeah.
It scrambles the data at a subatomic level, so even advanced recovery software reads nothing but static.
And that process was an absolute gold standard for years when data was stored magnetically.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Based on our sources, I have to push back on the reliance on degaussing for modern offices because the sources explicitly state that degaussing does absolutely nothing to solid-state drives or SSDs or flash memory.
Nothing at all.
Wait, so degaussing is totally useless on modern SSDs. Does that mean an old flash drive or an office copier is essentially a ticking time bomb of patient data?
It absolutely is, because the underlying architecture is completely different now. Solid-state drives use microscopic floating-gate transistors to store data. They trap electrical charges inside a silicon grid.
So it's not magnetic at all.
Right. Because the data is stored via trapped electrons rather than magnetic alignment, passing a powerful magnet over an SSD is as useless as passing a magnet over a piece of paper. The electrical charges remain perfectly undisturbed.
Wow.
If an IT department degausses a modern laptop drive or a USB thumb drive, they have accomplished literally nothing.
And that copier detail shifts the entire perspective on office security for me. We treat those massive multifunction printers like purely mechanical devices. We completely ignore the fact that they are highly vulnerable servers.
Yep, sitting right in the hallway.
Every single scan, every copied insurance card, every printed diagnostic report is cached onto that internal solid-state drive. Returning that machine at the end of a lease without addressing the SSD is a catastrophic breach waiting to happen. So if magnets don't work, what is the actual mechanism for rendering an SSD indecipherable?
Physical annihilation.
Sounds intense.
It has to be. You have to physically shred, disintegrate, or pulverize the storage medium. Specialized industrial shredders are built specifically to chew through the metal casings and silicon chips of solid-state drives, CDs, and DVDs.
So they're just fracturing the memory chips themselves into fragments too small to hold a charge.
Exactly. And for maximum security, particularly in high-stakes healthcare environments, many providers actually utilize a combined approach for older machines.
Combined approach, like doing both.
Yeah, they will degauss the device to wipe any magnetic components just in case, and then physically pulverize the entire unit to eliminate any mathematical possibility of data recovery across any storage medium.
That sheer mechanical complexity really explains why the global medical records management market hit over $2.1 billion in 2024. Healthcare organizations are pouring resources into professional document shredding and digital destruction, because the alternative, failing to execute these highly specific physical requirements, is financially devastating.
Ugh, devastating is the right word. The enforcement arm for these regulations is the Office for Civil Rights, or the OCR, within the Department of Health and Human Services.
And they don't mess around.
Not at all. Since they began active enforcement in 2008, they've collected over $140 million in HIPAA settlements. The financial penalties are engineered to force compliance through sheer economic gravity.
I mean, recent industry analysis shows the average cost of a U.S. healthcare data breach is now $10.93 million per incident.
Which is wild.
That is the highest of any economic sector, towering over finance and retail. And the government structures these penalties in 4 distinct tiers based on the organization's level of culpability.
Right, starting with Tier 1.
Yeah, Tier 1 applies to violations where the practice had a genuine lack of knowledge. But even in cases of total ignorance, the fines can reach up to $50,000 per violation, capped at $25,000 annually for repeat offenses.
And the tiers escalate sharply from there, culminating in Tier 4, which represents willful neglect that is not corrected.
So like actively ignoring the rules.
Precisely. This might involve a practice that repeatedly ignores internal audit warnings about unencrypted drives, or actively cuts the budget for secure disposal bins. Tier 4 carries a mandatory penalty of $50,000 per violation, with the annual maximum ballooning to $1.9 million.
And the highest vulnerability point isn't even some sophisticated cyber attack from an overseas hacker.
Nope.
According to our sources, over 60% of paper-based PHI breaches in healthcare settings happen during disposal. The moment you place a document in an unsecured dumpster or on the curb, your legal claim to privacy just vanishes.
Because of the Supreme Court precedent.
Right. The Supreme Court established long ago that trash left for collection is public domain. Dumpster diving is perfectly legal in the United States.
And the multiplier effect of those dumpster diving incidents is what bankrupts a practice. Let's examine a scenario, right? An employee improperly discards a single document in the regular trash.
Just one mistake.
Just one. But if that document is a printed daily schedule containing the names, appointment times, and treatment codes for 40 different patients, that one piece of paper constitutes 40 individual HIPAA violations.
So what does this all mean? It's like getting a speeding ticket. But instead of receiving just one fine for the vehicle, the officer writes a separate maximum penalty ticket for every single passenger sitting in the back seat.
That's a great way to put it.
The fines just multiply exponentially based on the number of individuals exposed in a single, careless toss into the trash.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the check written to the government is only a fraction of the total cost. These violations routinely trigger mandatory corrective action plans.
Which means the government moves in.
Exactly. Subjecting the medical practice to years of direct, intrusive government oversight from the OCR. Furthermore, the reputational damage severely fractures patient trust. And the strict liability nature of these disposal regulations means the consequences apply equally whether the breach was the result of an intentional corporate policy to skip shredding or a completely accidental mistake made by an exhausted employee during a chaotic office renovation.
Wow, so the law does not grant leniency for fatigue.
It absolutely does not.
Which means medical practices require an impenetrable operational shield to prove they executed everything perfectly when the OCR investigators initiate an audit. And that shield takes the form of a notarized certificate of destruction.
A golden ticket.
Yeah. This document acts as the final link in a verifiable chain of custody. It doesn't just say, "We took your trash." The sources detail that a compliance certificate logs the precise date, the specific method of destruction used, the facility location, the exact volume of material processed, and a description of the media destroyed.
Because evidentiary weight is everything during an OCR investigation. When auditors are reconstructing the timeline of a potential breach, verbal assurances from office managers carry zero value.
We promise we shredded it. It doesn't hold up.
Exactly. The notarized certificate provides the exact, verifiable evidence regulators demand to prove the life cycle of the data was properly terminated.
And the standards for the partners providing those certificates are incredibly rigorous. The sources highlight Neighborhood Parcel, operating since 2007 with a zero-breach record, as an example of this level of compliance.
That's just huge.
Right. They don't just buy a big shredder. They operate utilizing NAA AAA certified facilities. And NAD, that's the National Association for Information Destruction, requires facilities to undergo unannounced audits at least twice a year.
Just showing up at the door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Auditors can show up without warning to scrutinize personnel vetting, ensuring thorough background checks are maintained. They audit transportation security, verifying GPS tracking logs for the trucks.
They check everything.
They inspect the physical facility security, checking for camera blind spots and access controls, and they even physically measure the destruction quality to ensure those microcut standards are actually being met.
And it gets more complicated depending on where you are. Organizations operating in states like Massachusetts face overlapping jurisdictional requirements.
State and federal.
Right. Alongside federal HIPAA mandates, they must comply with State Law 201 CMR 17.00, which enforces its own strict requirements for the unreadable and unrecoverable disposal of residents' personal information.
So operating with a comprehensively certified destruction partner ensures a practice is satisfying both federal and state legal targets simultaneously, all through one managed logistics chain.
Yeah, and the logistics of that chain are intense. It involves locked, tamper-evident bins placed strategically throughout the medical office, preventing even internal employees from retrieving discarded files.
And the enclosed transport vehicles are strictly monitored, right?
Exactly. And certified providers even offer witness destruction appointments. At that Tewksbury facility mentioned in the sources, practices can arrange to physically watch their documents or hard drives be destroyed in real time.
Oh, wow. Closing the chain of custody before their very eyes. But beyond the intense compliance framework, there is a massive environmental reality of this process, too.
The green angle.
Yeah, the professional document destruction industry operates as a closed-loop circular economy. When a certified service destroys paper records, 100% of that waste is diverted from landfills and recycled into new commercial paper products.
And the environmental metrics are substantial. The sources document that recycling just 1 ton of properly shredded paper saves 7,000 gallons of water compared to manufacturing virgin paper.
That's incredible.
It is. It preserves between 17 and 31 trees. It saves 4,000 kilowatt hours of electricity and prevents 60 pounds of airborne pollutants from entering the atmosphere.
So it is a rare instance where maximum regulatory compliance directly aligns with maximum environmental sustainability.
A win-win.
But securing that notarized certificate of destruction and contributing to that recycling loop only works if the practice actually implements a documented internal policy. An auditor isn't just going to look for a pile of certificates stuffed in a desk drawer.
Definitely not. This raises an important question about how organizations manage compliance over time. The OCR looks for systemic, documented adherence, not just isolated acts of good behavior.
Right, not just good intentions.
Exactly. A practice must maintain written policies dictating exactly how long protected health information is retained, how it is secured during its active life, and the specific procedures for how it is tracked through to final destruction.
Makes sense.
That is why consistent certified destruction backed by continuous chain of custody documentation is arguably the highest impact compliance investment an administrator can make. It transforms a massive operational vulnerability into a heavily documented closed system.
It really is an incredible technological and legal evolution when you step back and look at the entire landscape. We have moved from a legal framework initially designed just to make insurance portable to an environment where security researchers are using optical software to reconstruct shredded ribbons.
It's escalated so quickly.
We're looking at the necessity of physically pulverizing microscopic silicon transistors hidden inside office copiers and relying on unannounced NAA AAA certified auditors to verify camera blind spots, all to safely dispose of a piece of paper and avoid a $10 million fine.
The stakes couldn't be higher.
Whether you're an administrator mapping out the compliance architecture of a massive hospital network, an IT professional tasked with decommissioning old hardware, or simply a patient handing over your driver's license at a front desk, you now understand the intense, highly regulated life cycle your personal health data undergoes before it is finally laid to rest.
And the severity of this life cycle is entirely justified by the threat landscape. The sources note that over $100 billion a year is lost to information thieves. Identity theft remains the fastest growing crime in the country.
Which is terrifying.
It really is. And a massive portion of that illicit industry is not fueled by elite hackers, but by criminals simply collecting valuable papers that ordinary people and careless businesses threw into the regular trash. Which leaves us with a final, rather sobering thought.
Let's hear it.
If a medical practice faces federal oversight and millions of dollars in punitive fines for accidentally putting a single sign-in sheet in the dumpster, well, what incredibly valuable, easily reconstructed pieces of your own personal life are you tossing into your curbside recycling bin every single week without a second thought?
Man, that crumpled up piece of paper in your hand might just be the highest stakes thing you touch all day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.